What is your emergency?
We are at a party at Tidwell and someone was shooting and someone got shot.
Okay, hold on 1 second, okay? All right.
Yeah.
And you're at the Tidwell, are you with the patient now that was shot?
Yes.
All right. Where were they shot at?
I don't know. They were one of my friends.
Okay, do you know who shot them?
No.
Okay. I've got people on the way, okay?
A call for service comes out saying that there's an active shooter. So we knew that this was a warehouse concert event. And as an officer, we know our job is to get there and help isolate the threat.
Actor, RP advises shooting is still occurring. Shooting is still occurring.
10-4.
En route to the location, my body camera activates automatically because there's an emergency happening.
24, I'm on scene.
24, receive it.
Anytime you hear there is a threat, there's a firearm, there's a weapon, it is normal for your brain to go, this is dangerous. This could harm you. I'm a father. I'm married. I have a family. But the sheriff's office is expected to protect the citizens of Smith County.
Right now, officers just showed up.
Where's he
Somebody
at?
just got shot down
Where's
here.
he at? Who's
They're
the
right
shooter?
at the warehouse.
Where's the shooter?
There's a guy in a white shirt with a gun. There's
already gone?
officers here now.
Okay, all right.
So there's officers here now.
24 getting reports that the gunman has already left the scene. I'm gonna go ahead and double check. I'm already parked out here on the loop extension at the entrance of Tidwell. Several subjects are leaving at a high rate of speed. You might want to pick it up, guys. Nobody knows at this time who the suspect is. You guys okay?
Yes, somebody up there that's bleeding. He's bleeding out. Hey, sir, he got shot. He's bleeding.
We got one victim according to witnesses. Is the shooter still up there?
Go.
Shooter?
Go.
As deputies approached the scene, they observed people running from the location as if their life depended on it. You don't know if one of those leaving could be the shooter or if there's multiple shooters, but you still have to get in there.
Put him down. Let me see him. Where'd he get hit?
I'll put a bandana right there.
Okay, all right. I got an ambulance coming. Shooter, where's he at?
I don't know.
Bro.
Nobody knows who the shooter is?
No, we don't know.
So you don't know he left?
There's somebody go ahead into the
All right,
hospital
put it
right
down.
now.
Put it down.
Ow!
Trill.
Where?
Stop.
Junior, bro.
Is it really blood back there, bro? Hey, don't worry about that.
Terrell, don't worry about it, bro.
24, I got one victim shot in the leg.
The victim was identified as Kentrell. We want to save this man's life. But you have a femoral artery inside your thigh, and it can be 20 to 30 seconds. You can bleed out of your body. You only have seconds to go depending on if it's a deep wound.
Come on. It's okay.
You want me to untie the bandana or no?
Nah, give him a favor. Hold on.
Yes, sir.
We got him. Yes.
The deputy takes his tourniquet and applies it to the legs.
Open your leg just slowly.
Open your leg.
Come on. Get you.
Come on, it's okay. The big one that got shot. Come on. I don't think he breathing. Hey, look at me. He laying right there by the fish. That's one of our niggas. He's gonna be jigging and just.
All right, this might be a little tight, all right? It's gonna be a little tight.
It's okay.
The tourniquet is then slid in and around the thigh and applying pressure and strapping it down. We then wind it up and tighten it.
We gotta do that. We gotta do that. We gotta do that. I'm so sorry. We gotta do that.
All right, it's gonna be a little tight.
I'm so sorry. You're such a great person. Like, I'm so sorry.
I come back and call him.
24, just for information, tourniquet's been put on.
Breathing, tourniquet applied.
And then we can tell the blood flow is stopped and we leave it there until medical personnel take it off.
Sir, did you check on the person inside?
I'm gonna be with you the whole way.
Is there
bro.
somebody
I swear to
inside?
God, I'm gonna be right. There's someone right there.
They said they transported another person.
He's laying right there,
There should
not
be
breathing.
somebody inside.
Is there somebody else inside, sir?
Yes, sir.
Then deputies received the information that there was another gunshot victim at the location. Just more and more chaos.
24, you in that or outside the facility?
24, we got a second victim possible. Speed it up.
Breathing, possible another victim.
They found the next gunshot victim shirtless at the entrance of the club.
Can you help him?
Where'd he get hit?
He got, look at his mouth. I think
Where'd he
got
get
hit in
hit?
his mouth. I think got hit in his mouth.
That's why I'm trying to make sure my cousin good.
10-4, we got 2 victims. One shot in the leg, the other one, I don't know where he's hit. He's unresponsive at this time.
EMS is on scene. They're coming.
Who did this? Does anybody know who did this? Nobody?
No.
They're providing the CPR, and it's terrible. They see a small amount of blood coming out of his mouth. They see him proned out on the ground, and he's not responding to anyone talking to him.
Where's my victim? Up the top to the right.
We get medical up there. That's when we realize that he has an actual gunshot wound to his back. This is not something we're unaccustomed to, but it's something that no one wants to deal with as a human being.
What's his name?
It's Keontae there.
K-E-Y?
U-N-D-T.
U-N-D-T-A.
We learned the identity of the unresponsive victim as Keontae Barrett. He was transported to the hospital.
Keontae was a real good kid. He was lovable. He was happy. He got along with his brothers and sisters. He cared for all of them. And he was showing them the way that it's supposed to be. The moment I found out about Keontae getting shot, his brother had called me. I said, Daddy, they just called me and told me Keontae got shot. I was in disbelief.
They said, hurry up and get to the hospital because Keontae's been shot. Why my son? Why my son? I didn't understand. Keontae was a good person. I was asking God, why?
But we need to make sure we get our scene integrity going up, so we move everybody out here for just a moment, all right?
Once we have the medically injured taken care of, we do a safety sweep of the area. We want to make sure that we don't have a shooter here anymore. We don't have an active threat.
Where were they shot, in the leg or the back? Or you remember where they were?
Two was shot in the leg. One is headed to the hospital right now, and one's shot in the side. I don't know.
You didn't see anything happen?
No, sir.
The shooter has left. Information was passed that another gunshot victim, Ira, had already been transported to the hospital.
When I arrive on scene, I do take control of the scene, being the lead detective. Every decision from there on out goes through me. At that point, we had 3 victims at the hospital that had been shot.
That's where the first victim was sitting. The first one got transported by POV.
Okay.
That wooden fence, that's where the
There's
second victim was.
EMS trash where he was laying.
Yeah.
First thing I want to do is talk to my deputies to see what they've gathered so far.
Shooting happened inside, correct?
Yes. You're gonna walk in, there's a stage right in the middle. On the left-hand side is where the casings are.
So let's go check that out.
My deputies led me to believe that the shooting actually occurred inside the building. So of course, we were brought to inside the warehouse. Inside the warehouse, just chaotic scene. But one thing I was able to notice right away were casings. I could actually observe them on the concrete floor.
There's clothing items all over the place. Chairs torn down. We can see blood spatter on ground, on some objects.
You can tell that from the knocked over tables, the trash, cups everywhere, just chaos. My crime scene technician was able to show me evidence of bullet holes in the ceiling. We found out that a flyer went out for the rap group, the Head Honchos. They were inviting people to come party with them at Tidwell that night, and that's why everyone was there that night. From the evidence so far, we still had a lot of unanswered questions. We needed more to move forward with our investigation. I did have deputies go talk to witnesses that were still located on scene and bring those statements back to me.
And as soon as it happened, everyone got down and I dived off to the stage.
Shots started going off probably like 15 seconds after the fight started.
What we need to know is who was here, why were you here, what was going on, what did you see?
Did you see anything?
I was the DJ.
Okay.
I was on stage, I was DJing, and I started seeing a scuffle. So naturally, I turned the music off, and I turned off the music. Next thing I knew, I just heard the shots, and we all just got down. And when I got up, my friend Trey was hit, and my friend Junior was hit. And when I went outside, my friend was laying on the ground.
Colin did mention that this all started over an initial physical altercation on the stage during the concert that night.
Did you see anybody that was doing the shooting?
No, one of them.
What's his name?
PJ.
PJ? So PJ is one of the people involved in.
Yeah, that's what I only know his alias is PJ.
Who is PJ, and is he my potential shooter? We need to find out everything we can about him because he is still a potential threat. We still don't know exactly what happened, and it was still a mystery for us. Our deputies were continuing to get witness statements throughout the night. Receiving the name PJ, the first thing I start thinking is, was this an intentional shooting? There are so many questions and scenarios that go through my head now. We need to find out if that's even his real name.
Is it nicknamed just PJ, or is that short for something? Those
it might be short for something. It might be. We just know about PJ.
White, black, Hispanic?
He's black.
Anybody know where PJ lives?
The apartment complex in Tyler, that's all I can tell you. He lives there with his mom.
Okay, so PJ lives with his mom.
Through our law enforcement resources and our research, we were able to locate PJ's address. We wanted to get our deputies and detectives over there as soon as possible so we could pick him up and bring him in for questioning.
We located PJ and we interviewed him.
Do you would like to go by your last name for
How you know me, PJ?
PJ, is that okay? Okay. Detective Smith, how are you? Huh?
We've been out this all
Right, yeah, I was gonna say, you know we've been out this all day. So we kinda, and plus, you know,
And your name
we
been
get
in it
told.
all day.
Good or bad?
It ain't good.
PJ was a young man looking to make a name for himself. He tells me that he go where he want to go, he wear what he want to wear, he do what he want to do.
Do me a favor, start to finish, tell me from the minute you got there to the minute you left, what is going on?
PJ was there that night at the concert for the rap group, the Head Honchos. PJ let us know that he's had beef with the Head Honchos for a long time. During one of the Head Honchos songs, they started singing, which was called Red Rum. And of course, Red Rum means murder, if you twisted the words around. He got very offended by it. And this is what started PJ going on this stage and start fighting them. Tells us he's more of a physical fighter and does not carry a gun.
People texting me, PJ, was you shooting at the party? Was you shooting at the party? Was you shooting at the party? I know you don't mess with guns. You shoot. I don't mess with guns. What the I mean, what in the world do I look like messing with a gun? I'm on probation. Get caught with one. I'm gone. I don't want to spend no time in jail. I don't have any intentions. I don't feel the need to take nobody off this earth unless they threaten me. What I mean by threatening is in a kill to be killed situation.
PJ did not see who the shooter was that night.
After our interview with PJ, it was determined that we didn't have any evidence at that time. We had nothing to hold him on.
I'm more scared of the police than I'm scared of any another African American.
We did eventually let him go and leave the sheriff's office.
You taking me? Yep.
We were, of course, looking for all types of leads. So I sent my fellow detectives to the hospital so they could talk to the victims to see if they could relay any new evidence to see who had shot them. So one of the victims my detective spoke to at the hospital was Cantrell. Cantrell actually was shot in the leg while on scene.
We're trying to figure out if there was a beef with somebody, if there was somebody pissed off at you or him. If you guys were up there rapping, was it a rap battle? Were talking crap about somebody?
We were just trying to get people off the stage that didn't belong.
And that dude was just going on. And then he started throwing his hands, and everybody else started fighting. I fell.
Do you know who that dude was?
Control just gave me a very vague statement that he was at the club. He heard people fighting, and then he was shot. Control just didn't really give any indication that he knew who the shooter was. There was a lot of things that weren't answered that I needed answers to. So after speaking to Contrell, we located another victim that had also been shot in the leg. Ira, who was in another part of the hospital. Tell me about when you got hit and you feel it from the back.
With the, I had got punched in the eye first. Like, somebody hit me in the eye, and then it was like maybe 3 seconds later, it was pow, pow. And then, I don't know, I didn't feel the gunshot at first, but then, like, I slowly started falling down, and I was like, yeah, I got shot.
Ira stated that there was a fight that had broken out, and he ended up getting shot in the leg. Ira also said he didn't see who shot the gun.
We asked him if he could identify anybody on that stage that was included in the fight, and the name he gave us was Trayvon Maddox. But that was his own friend, and he had no thought in the world that his own friend would shoot him. However, Trayvon Maddox needs to be located because now I'm interested in what Trey has to say and what he observed that night.
The atmosphere that night in the hospital lobby, it was what you would expect, with a lot of concerned people looking for information on their family member or their friend.
We also noticed the other victims, Keontae's parents, were there sitting in a consulting room to where they were alone away from everyone. Detective Loftus and I began speaking to the parents.
All right, Ron, your son, what's your son's name?
Keontae, K-E-Y-U-N-E-T-A, Barrett. He got a tattoo on his arm. Is it?
A red, blue rose with Susan.
Susan.
And some other tattoos. Yeah.
Yeah, on his shoulder. I forgot what that was. He was brought in. It was too much damage. He didn't make it? No, sir.
Oh my God! Oh no!
We had to notify them of what had happened. Keontae had passed, and we knew at that point we were working a homicide investigation. And the totality and everything kind of got a lot more intense at that point.
And they told us that they couldn't save him, that they lost him. That was the moment that it sunk into me that I'm gonna have to bury a child. I just lost a son.
And I was asking God, like, what did I do? What did I do wrong for you to punish me because you took my son from me? I died when Keontae died.
Calm down. Just calm down.
When I did let them know, the father was extremely distraught. He actually knocked me against the wall, getting out the door, and the whole room went dark because he knocked me up against the light switch. After I notified the parents, they left the room and notified everybody that was outside that were also waiting for information. The whole ER erupted. They were distraught. They were upset. They were sad, and it was just chaos.
You better not hit it. Back up. You better not hit it. Back up. Everybody back up. Get everybody out of here. Everybody out. Back up. Everybody out. Back up.
There were pictures coming off the wall. Tyler PD officers were struggling to keep people at bay, to keep them from tearing the room up. There was a ton of emotion in that room.
Everybody come on. Come on. You need help. I know that. Move back. But everybody's crowding around. Not helping. Let me go.
The very next thing we needed to do was get back control of that situation and get everybody out.
It was a tense situation. It was a bomb ready to go off.
Back up. Everybody back up.
We were no longer working just a shooting. We were working a murder. Emotions were high. Names were being thrown out. Blame was being thrown out, which caused people to actually start fighting each other because of who they were accusing or who they were protecting. One of the names that was being thrown out was Trayvon Maddox. We needed to turn our attention to Trayvon and get him in for an interview. During our research on information on Trayvon Maddox, it was brought to our attention that he had a previous arrest for unlawful carry of a weapon. This definitely tells us that Trayvon could possibly be armed with a handgun, and he possibly is our shooter. Through our law enforcement resources, we were able to produce an address for Trayvon.
So the next morning, myself, Detective Smith, Detective McClanahan all went to Trayvon's apartment to make contact with him.
Hey, Trey, how are you? Good morning. Hey, so of course, you know why we're here, right? But what happened last night? Yeah, because I know you were one of the individuals there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Trayvon tells me right away, I was expecting you guys to come to my house. He appeared to be calm, cooperative, wasn't really worried that we were there.
Did you ever go to the hospital?
I couldn't go to the hospital because they thought I did it. They thought like I shot him, like literally. They thought.
Who said that?
Everybody, like all them, his family, like because they were trying to fight with my friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said that he knew that a lot of people were so-called trash talking him, calling him the shooter, saying that he's the one that shot Keontae and being blamed for it. So I continued to press Trayvon on what happened at the club.
People came on stage and they hit my homeboy Trail. So when they hit him, gunshots went off. Mm-hmm. And when the gunshots went off, I heard 2 gunshots, right? Mm-hmm. I heard 2 gunshots. He got hit in the leg. He said, "Oh, I'm shot." So I grabbed his gun. I shot in the air. There's a bullet hole in the, you can go look at Tidwell. There is a bullet hole in the air where I shot right in the air. And then 3 more shots went off at us on stage.
When Trayvon mentioned that he grabbed a gun from Contrell's waist, this is the first time I've heard that Contrell had a gun on him. Now, according to Trayvon, he said he wanted to fire Contrell's gun, fire it in the air because he wanted people to scatter and run away. He actually told us to go check the ceiling at Tidwell, which we already knew there was holes in the ceiling. So this was something that supported his story. But was it the initial first shot? It's still unknown at this point, but it's important that we find out.
Where's the gun at?
You said, where is the gun? The gun is in my car. Like, I didn't drive my car here because I was drunk. So it was at Tidwell. I gave my keys back to my homeboy.
It was still hard to believe that he didn't know where this gun was. It was definitely suspicious, so we needed to bring him down to our office for more questioning.
We don't have a arrest warrant or anything from you, okay? Our main goal is just to find out what is going on.
I will be right here if y'all have any arrest
Well, now
warrants.
now I will say this though. We do need you to come with us though, okay?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, this way.
When we arrived to our office with Trayvon, of course, we walk him in and we sit him in one of our interview rooms. We know he had more to give. We know he knows more than actually what he told us. And we're hoping to go in there and get that information from him.
From the beginning, and as best as you can, everything you can remember, okay?
So, we was all on stage and like we're performing and there's the group that don't like us. And one of them got mad when he got on stage and pushed my homeboy and then he hit him. And when he hit him, I heard a shot, like somebody shot. And my homeboy looked at me, he said, I got shot. And then I grabbed my homeboy's gun and I shot in the air to make everybody leave. And that's when I heard 3 more shots in the crowd. And then everybody like ran like after them 3 shots. And then there was this big dude, the G dude, he was outside with a gun.
He initially stuck with his story, but during further questioning, he finally revealed to us a name of an individual that he saw outside of the club with a gun in his hand and gave us the name G, which stood for Giavari. It could be the fact that he's just trying to get all this off of him and steer us in a different direction, but it's still a lead we need to follow up with because Giavari could have been the possible shooter too of Keontae.
All right, sit tight for a second.
Trayvon admitted to shooting a gun in a place that was full with innocent bystanders, a very crowded place. So we made the decision to go forward and arrest him for deadly conduct, which is a felony charge. He was taken to our Smith County Jail. We still had unanswered questions, especially with the gun that Trayvon used. Where it was, you know, we had no idea at that point, and this was something that was very important to this case because, again, in back of my mind, he still could be responsible for Keontae's death. It is extremely important to find the gun that Trayvon used because that's something that we can do ballistic analysis on to prove if he was responsible for Keontae's death or he just shot up in the ceiling.
Trayvon being charged and arrested at the time gave us a little time to conduct more investigations to find out what actually is true about what he told us.
Due to Trayvon mentioning Giavari to us, especially with a gun in his hands, he's now become someone of interest to us in this case. During our initial research with Giavari, he had no criminal history, he had no connection to any of our victims, but we need to follow up any lead that leads us to anyone who could be responsible for Keontae's death. So we start watching him during surveillance. Then I received word from my narcotics detectives and fellow deputies they saw Giavari get in his car and followed him. We had the radio on and we were listening. He could be armed and dangerous.
Hey, felony stop, guys, felony stop.
57, he's putting over just by the 12 Oaks Motel.
It's a high-risk traffic stop where officers, when they initially get out, they don't approach the vehicle. They actually will have weapons drawn and they will call out the suspect out of their vehicle and have them walk back to them because, again, he could be potentially armed.
Driver, roll down your window. Turn off your engine. Take your keys out of the ignition. Go ahead, throw your keys out.
Knowing a suspect might be armed, you have to be ready for any and everything, especially when we're investigating the shooting. He could be one of the shooters. I've been in law enforcement 20 years. I don't know if I've ever done a simple traffic stop and not been nervous.
Open the door from the outside. Go ahead and step out. Keep your hands visible. Keep your hands up. Step out. Just step out. Keep your hands up. Turn away from me. Back up slowly.
During the felony traffic stop, deputies were able to call out the individual driving the car back to them and properly detain him. They were able to identify the individual as being Giavari.
Hey, go back. What's going on? Tell them if they need to get their gun, use the key to open the trunk. Use the key to open the trunk? It's in the trunk? Yeah. Hey, say you need a key to open up the trunk. That's where the pistol's at.
During Giovari's felony traffic stop, officers located a handgun in the trunk of his vehicle. Finding a firearm in Giovari's vehicle was very important, especially if this could be the potential murder weapon of Keontae.
Do you mind passing that seat?
Yeah.
Once they had Giovari detained and in custody, they did bring him down to the sheriff's office for an interview. He was willing to talk to us. You start and you
Alright, so boom. I probably wasn't even there for like 15 minutes. So I get there, whatever this is. I mean, I can tell there's a lot of tension going on from some guys that's on the dance floor, some guys that's on the stage. And they start fighting on stage, probably 10, 15 seconds. That's when you hear the first shot. And then after the first one, like 2 more went out. They were like back to back, they were like pow, pow. So everybody trying to get out the door or whatever. I went and got my gun. I grabbed my gun from the car. I didn't have my gun at first, I grabbed my gun from the car.
Giovari stated that he actually retrieved his gun from his car, but it was after the shots had been fired already and people were running out of the building. Giovari tells us that he went to grab his gun and it was for his protection.
Giovari admitted to getting his firearm from his vehicle, but he also stated that he didn't shoot it. I was skeptical to anything Giovari was saying.
I mean, and I know like a couple of people seen me with my gun, but I ain't shooting nobody. You can check the ballistics or whatever you need to do. I'm just trying to, clear my name.
He was very adamant on clearing his name and wanting us to know and believe that he had no involvement in the death of Keontae Barrett. He shared a lot of information with us and was very forthcoming. But Giovari was arrested on unrelated charges for marijuana. We still need to take that weapon and still have it analyzed, see if it is ruled out or potentially the murder weapon. As we continue to investigate, a rumor was brought to our attention that a man named Nathan Austin was in possible possession of the gun that Trayvon used.
With that information, a team of investigators went to locate Nathan and found Nathan at a pond.
When detectives approach Nathan in the pond, the first thing he says to them is, "I'm looking for the gun that Trayvon used." Nathan does tell detectives he is responsible for throwing the gun in the pond. So with this new information, we brought Nathan to our office for further questioning.
This is Detective Teresa.
Hi, Nathan.
Yeah. She's gonna be with me. I'm gonna turn my phone on silent, okay? So she shows up and she's like, I've got this, Trey gave me this gun.
She wanted to throw it in Lake Tyler.
Okay.
I was just like, that's dumb.
Nathan did admit to us that he was there at Tidwell after they went to the hospital. While he was at the hospital, he was actually approached by a girl there who said that she was at the concert that night and that she had possession of Trayvon's gun.
I was like, just come out to my land and put it in my lake. So then you don't get seen on the side of the road. She just kept freaking out, and said she wanted to get rid of it. And I was like, fine, just give it to me and I'll do it.
So she took the gun out of the trunk and handed it to you?
Yeah, she followed me down to the lake. And then I threw it in the lake.
At this point, since we don't know the actual identification of the actual shooter, Nathan is now a suspect as well. Everybody's a suspect until the actual shooter is identified.
During my interview with Nathan, he allowed us to search his cell phone, which provided us messages between him and Trayvon. Trayvon wanted Nathan to recover the gun from the pond because he believed this would clear his name. It was very important for us to recover this weapon, this gun that was now in this pond. It's a big piece of evidence because any gun recovered in this case is a potential murder weapon, the weapon that killed Keontae Barrett.
The main priority is locating the gun. So dive team was assembled, and the dive team was able to locate the gun in the pond.
We have Trayvon's gun and Giovari's gun sent off for testing to see if one of those matches the bullet that took Keontae's life. Eventually, we did get the results back.
In the investigation, we located and tested Giovari's gun, and we also tested the gun located in the pond that was used by Trayvon and discarded by Nathan. One of the guns resulted in being a match for the gun used to kill Keontae.
When I did receive the results of the ballistic testing proving which gun shot and killed Keontae, I decided to go to the Smith County Jail where Trayvon was still being held on the deadly conduct charge and actually give him the news of my findings.
We do have to tell you something.
What is that?
And it's not good news.
What is that?
Okay, we dragged the palm, we got the gun back, and it was where they were at, okay? There was no magazine. But we do know for a fact, from evidence, they were shot more than once. Barrett, Keontae?
Keontae?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was murdered by that gun.
How was he murdered by that gun? How was he shot by that gun if I did not shoot him with that gun? How was he murdered by that gun?
Ballistic analysis came back and showed that Trayvon's gun matched the bullet that killed Keontae Barrett.
The bullet that killed Barrett came from the gun that was in your hand.
How did that, how?
Because
Please tell me how.
Okay, forensic science, okay? They did all the testing. The gun was shot more than once. There was a witness who said that you did a double tap. You may have not realized it.
I did not shoot that boy. That was my friend.
I know.
He kept on repeating that he shot up in the ceiling. He also would say maybe it was a ricochet, maybe the bullet bounced, but again, I told Trayvon that even if it was a ricochet, the science behind it and all the evidence, even if with a ricochet, you're responsible for that bullet. You knowingly pulled the trigger and you're responsible for wherever that bullet goes.
He was in disbelief. He still did not believe that he killed Keontae.
Why would I shoot him?
Honestly, I believe it was an accident. I do believe it was an accident.
I did not shoot him.
I mean, he had took a life. He should have been, in my eyes, remorseful, apologizing. I can understand being in disbelief, but it didn't seem like there was too much remorse there. Keontae was dead. His family is grieving. He knew Keontae. As a result of the investigation, Trayvon pled to the charge of manslaughter and was sentenced to 10 years.
There was no time that I thought Nathan Austin was responsible for the death of Keontae Barrett. There was nothing pointing towards him being involved. It's still unknown if there's more than one shooter. And till this day, we still have not been able to identify who else shot that night. But we know Trayvon Maddox shot Keontae.
I don't believe Trayvon did it intentionally. I believe it was an accident. But you have to question when he said he shot it in the air, what exactly does that mean? There's no way to tell, and somebody died from it. It was a relief to be able to let the parents know that we had found the person responsible for killing Keontae.
And when I first heard that they had arrested somebody and who it was, I mean, I knew this kid, and I knew this kid's parents. And had that kid would have came to me and told me that it was an accident, that he accidentally did that, then I could have forgiven him for that. But due to the fact that he tried to hide it and cover it up and act like he didn't do it, and didn't show no remorse when we was in the courtroom, nah, I don't accept the type of sentencing that they gave him.
My life is still in 2019. The day my baby died, that's the day I stopped living. I really haven't processed it. I know he's not coming back, and I know Keontae will want me to go on, but it feel like I'm stuck in 2019. When my son died, I died.
After Keontae passed, his brothers and sisters, we had these made for him. It's a keepsake for Keontae to always remember him by. On the back, it's got a saying on it. You'll always be near to our hearts. This is my memory of him. I mean, it's just, it's bittersweet. He was a good kid, taken too soon.
The morning of June 12, 1988, dawned like any other in the small Texas town of Lubbock, calm, sun-hazed streets and the faint hum of early traffic filling the air. But calm was a lie. By mid-morning, the peace shattered when a cyclist riding along the deserted county road stumbled upon a scene that would haunt this town for decades. A body lay sprawled beside the weeds, half hidden by shadows, the eyes wide open in a silent scream, skin pale against the dusty earth. No identification, no clues, just the echo of a life violently interrupted. Panic rippled through the community. Neighbors whispered, rumors flared, and the sheriff's office moved with a cold efficiency that only comes from experience. But even they were rattled. Whoever this person was, the brutality spoke of someone who knew no restraint. Detectives arrived, notebooks in hand, cameras clicking, recording each twisted detail. Torn clothing, scuffed shoes, dirt under fingernails suggesting a struggle, perhaps a desperate attempt to escape. The wind blew gently, carrying away a scent too faint for anyone to recognize, a fleeting trace of what had transpired. Witnesses were questioned. A jogger reported seeing a dark sedan speed past the road the night before. A local store clerk remembered a figure buying a bottle of water late in the evening. Clothing mismatched, hood pulled low. Nothing concrete, nothing arresting. Just fragments that refused to form a picture. The town held its breath. The local newspaper printed bold headlines, "Mysterious Death Shocks Lubbock. Who is the stranger found on County Road?" People whispered about strangers, about the creeping unknown, the cold presence that had suddenly entered their lives. The sheriff called in the state crime lab. Fingerprints, fibers, hairs, and soil samples were collected, cataloged, and meticulously logged. They hoped science would speak where the witnesses could not. Yet, as weeks stretched into months, the case remained stubbornly silent. No matches in the national database, no missing person reports fitting the description. Every lead ended in dead ends, every clue a whisper lost in the wind. Families went about their lives, but sleep came uneasy. The air carried a subtle tension, a communal anxiety. Mothers clutched their children tighter, men avoided late-night walks. The streets seemed narrower, more sinister. And in the sheriff's office, detectives replayed their questions over and over, combing every inch of evidence, tracing every possible connection. The body was finally identified as 24-year-old Rachel Sutton, a waitress who had moved to Lubbock only months before. She was known for her laugh, the warmth in her eyes, the way she remembered regular customers' orders. Gone in an instant, leaving nothing but shock and a trail of questions. Rachel's apartment told a story as haunting as the scene on the road. Her small space was orderly, a life frozen mid-motion. An unfinished cup of coffee, a notebook with scribbled recipes, a jacket draped over a chair as if she had been about to leave. Nothing out of place, nothing violent. Nothing to suggest she had enemies, no bills overdue, no arguments with friends. Everyone who knew her described her as careful, friendly, cautious. Yet someone had decided to end her life brutally, with methodical precision, leaving behind only terror and a mystery. Detectives explored every avenue. Co-workers, past relationships, neighbors, local drifters, anyone who could have harbored animosity. They interviewed hundreds, following every lead no matter how small. The dark sedan was traced to a rental agency, only to reveal it had been returned by an unknown party. Store clerks could not recall faces beyond fleeting impressions. CCTV didn't exist in this rural area, and landlines offered no digital breadcrumbs. Every path seemed to vanish before it began, swallowed by the silence of a town unwilling, or unable, to reveal its secrets. Months turned into a year. Rachel's death became a shadow over Lubbock, a ghost story whispered at the diner, in the schoolyard, in the dim corners of the local bar. Detectives never gave up, but frustration grew like a stain they could not scrub out. Evidence collected, fibers, hair, partial fingerprints, yielded nothing. Crime labs ran tests repeatedly. Technology of the 1980s was not sufficient to uncover the identity of a skilled perpetrator. Community meetings were held, volunteers joined search parties, but no one knew where to look, how to connect the fragments into a coherent truth. Each anniversary of her death was marked by silence. Flowers left anonymously at the roadside where her body was found. Silence and sorrow. Then came the whispers of strange sightings. A shadowy figure seen near the highway at night, headlights catching someone walking alone, long coat flapping in the wind. A man reported hearing cries from the edge of town but found nothing when he went to investigate. Others swore they saw a woman matching Rachel's description in distant towns. Ghostly, ethereal, a trick of memory or longing. Police filed reports, but nothing concrete emerged. The unknown had settled into the fabric of the town like a silent predator, present, yet invisible. As years passed, the case became emblematic of frustration, a cold case in the truest sense. New detectives arrived, bringing fresh eyes and new techniques, but the trail had long since grown cold. Forensic science advanced, DNA testing improved, national databases expanded, yet the puzzle resisted solution. Each new lead was pursued, only to collapse under scrutiny. Local folklore began to mix with reality. Rachel's story was told and retold, morphing slightly with each retelling, like a memory stretched thin, haunting a town unwilling to forget, unwilling to move on. Family members never gave up. Rachel's mother, gray-haired now, continued to call the sheriff's office, letters of inquiry piling up, each signed with hope that refused to die. Friends maintained vigils, leaving candles at the roadside, small acts of remembrance that became ritual. Every year, the anniversary brought an acute awareness of absence, a reminder of a question that had no answer. Why Rachel? Why here? Why then? Each question was a knot in the collective chest of a town gripped by the invisible hand of an unsolved crime. Investigators scoured historical records. Any pattern of violent crime, any similar disappearance, any connection to transient populations, every angle was explored. Interviews were repeated. Suspects were profiled psychologically. Some were ruled out, others lingered on the periphery, shadows that could not be grasped. The air of suspicion grew thick. People became wary of strangers. Neighbors eyed each other warily. A creeping paranoia that comes from knowing a predator walked among you, unseen, untouched. Lubbock changed quietly, subtly, the normal rhythms of a small town fractured by an act of cruelty that refused to vanish. One breakthrough seemed close when a partial fingerprint was finally compared against a limited database in the early 1990s. Hearts raced. Could it be the lead they had been waiting for? The fingerprint yielded a name, but when confronted, the suspect's alibi held strong. Investigators were forced to release him. The relief mingled with renewed despair. Evidence that had once promised closure dissolved, leaving detectives staring at walls of files, at photographs of Rachel, at the silence that had become deafening. By the late 1990s, technological advances offered new hope. DNA analysis had become sophisticated. Investigators preserved every biological trace meticulously, banking on future breakthroughs. The case was far from forgotten. It was paused, suspended in amber. Every new forensic innovation was applied retrospectively, but Rachel's death remained unsolved. The town had learned to live with a ghost, an unresolved tension that lingered in the air. The roadside where she was found became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking understanding, for those mourning, for those who remembered what it was to lose someone without knowing why. Even in the new millennium, interest did not wane. Cold case units emerged, dedicated to reviewing unsolved homicides from decades past. Rachel Sutton's name was entered into every system, every initiative. Volunteers pored over old police reports, piecing together timelines, evaluating witness statements, seeking inconsistencies or overlooked details. Patterns were sought in the minutiae, connections drawn where previously none had been seen. And yet, for all the effort, the truth remained a specter just beyond reach. The psychological impact on the town was undeniable. Anxiety became woven into daily life. Some residents avoided travel along the county road entirely, convinced the dark presence lingered. Others spoke in hushed tones about the one who got away, a predator invisible yet known intimately by the collective conscience. Local journalists occasionally revisited the story, rekindling public interest, but each article, each broadcast, ended with the same somber refrain. Unanswered questions, no arrest, a cold case that chilled a community to its core. By now, Rachel's story was no longer just a local tragedy. It was emblematic of the fragility of life and the persistence of evil hidden in plain sight. Detectives carried the burden forward, generations of law enforcement touched by the same frustration, the same obsession with closure. Every unexplained detail was cataloged, every potential suspect revisited, but the puzzle remained incomplete. And in the hearts of Lubbock residents, in the spaces where fear and grief met, Rachel's memory lingered, a reminder that not all stories have endings, and some crimes resist resolution, leaving communities suspended in a haunting limbo between loss and justice. The years dragged on, but the shadow of Rachel Sutton's death never lifted from Lubbock. Summer scorched the streets with relentless sun, and winter brought cold nights that seemed sharper than the temperature suggested, as if the town itself remembered that June morning when innocence was stolen and left scattered in the dust. Investigators rotated in and out of the case, some driven by duty, some by obsession, each poring over files, photographs, and notebooks, yet the killer remained invisible, a phantom in a town that had once felt safe. The road where she was found became a whispered landmark, a place where people spoke in lowered voices, as if the very act of saying her name aloud might summon the unseen force that had ended her life. In the early 2000s, renewed interest arrived with the promise of forensic technology. DNA analysis had evolved. Cold case units across Texas were reopening files, extracting genetic material preserved decades earlier. Detectives approached the preserved evidence with cautious optimism, gloves shaking slightly as they touched vials and envelopes that contained Rachel's last physical traces. Fibers from her torn dress, hair collected at the scene, skin cells scraped from fingernails. Each item was cataloged meticulously, a key to a door no one yet knew existed. Every test carried the weight of decades of frustration, hope, and collective grief. The air in the lab was sterile, but tension hung like humidity, heavy and oppressive. Volunteers and amateur sleuths, driven by fascination and compassion, began combing through public records, old newspapers, and archived interviews. They compared timelines, checked alibis, and traced the movements of everyone in the county the night Rachel disappeared. Rumors blossomed like wildflowers, some ridiculous, some plausible, but nothing concrete ever emerged. A trucker passing through remembered a hitchhiker on the highway. A retired teacher claimed to have seen a figure fleeing into the woods. Each fragment seemed promising until scrutiny crushed it under the weight of impossibility. The case developed a life of its own, circulating in online forums years before social media truly existed. A ghost in the digital ether, alive in speculation but silent in reality. Local law enforcement began interviewing witnesses again, hoping the passage of time would loosen lips, unravel memories that had stiffened with fear or shame. Some memories flickered, unreliable but compelling. A diner waitress recalled seeing a man near Rachel's apartment the day before her death, a man with sharp eyes and a brief, polite smile. Another neighbor remembered a car parked outside her building for hours, engine running, music faintly audible through closed windows. But the more detectives tried to piece these fragments together, the more elusive the picture became. The case mocked their efforts, existing just beyond the edge of clarity. By 2008, the town itself had changed. Lubbock expanded, roads widened, new neighborhoods sprouted. But the county road remained untouched, a relic of memory and fear. Some residents avoided it entirely, fearing that driving past would somehow invite the past back into the present. Children dared each other to approach the site, only to retreat trembling when the wind whispered through the weeds. And always the question lingered, who had done this and why had they chosen Rachel? It was a question that had no answer, a question that had become the town's collective wound, never scabbed, never healed. Detectives pursued every scientific lead. Partial DNA was run against national databases multiple times, each iteration a meticulous process of elimination. Each time, no match, no connection, no breakthrough. Specialists were brought in, reviewing the case with fresh eyes, but the crime's signature, the cold precision, the absence of immediate motive, defied profiling. Psychological experts suggested the killer was methodical, patient, someone who thrived on control, someone who had planned the murder with meticulous care. The lack of forensic traces beyond the obvious suggested an understanding of crime scene management, an experience that unsettled the most seasoned investigators. Meanwhile, the social aspect of the town continued to fray. Suspicion became a quiet current under everyday interactions. People who had lived side by side for decades eyed one another with subtle caution, neighbors wondering silently if the person they waved to each morning could harbor darkness unseen. Rachel's story was invoked as a cautionary tale in schools, a grim lesson that safety was fragile. Adults walked streets differently, aware of the invisible threads that could unravel life in an instant. Her memory became an unspoken bond among residents, a reminder of mortality and the inexplicable cruelty of strangers, or perhaps, of someone they had passed on the sidewalk 1,000 times. In 2012, a breakthrough almost occurred. Investigators discovered an overlooked lead in a distant county. A report from 1987 about a man with a history of violent behavior in locations matching Rachel's routine. Could this have been the man who drove the dark sedan, the one fleetingly glimpsed by witnesses? A search of old records and prison logs yielded names and movements that seemed eerily consistent, but every avenue ended in frustration. Alibis, missing documentation, gaps in memory, they were obstacles that no amount of modern technology could fully bridge. The case remained stubbornly unsolved, a monument to patience, diligence, and human limitation. Through it all, the media returned to the story periodically, reigniting interest, stirring unease, reminding the town that some shadows never vanish. National true crime documentaries featured Rachel's case, emphasizing the strange precision, the vanished evidence, the unanswered questions. Each retelling brought her face back into the collective consciousness. Her wide eyes, her soft voice, her smile frozen in time through photographs and fading memories. Experts spoke of cold cases as puzzles, of the unique terror that lingers when a life is stolen with no clear motive, leaving communities trapped between shock and grief. By 2015, the sheriff's office had digitized every note, every photograph, every fiber collected from the scene. The data was cross-referenced with countless new databases, AI-assisted pattern analysis applied to movements, timelines, and witness statements. Volunteers from across the country offered theories, some absurd, some insightful, but no theory could bridge the gap between suspicion and proof. The case had transformed from a local tragedy into a complex forensic challenge, a test of persistence against the limitations of evidence and time. Family members continued to advocate relentlessly. Rachel's mother, older now, still maintained a room dedicated to her daughter's memory, with photographs, letters, and news clippings meticulously arranged. Friends organized memorial runs, community vigils, and online campaigns to keep her name in the public eye, hoping that visibility might someday spark recognition or confession. Each year, a small ceremony was held on the county road, flowers laid where she had fallen, candles flickering against the wind. Silence enveloped the gathering, a collective mourning, punctuated only by the whisper of leaves and the occasional distant engine. Rumors of sightings persisted, Some swore they saw her in neighboring towns, a spectral figure, a haunting reminder that death, in memory, could linger like fog. Others recounted strange cars, unknown voices, the faint smell of perfume or dust drifting unexpectedly. Each report was investigated, each one dismissed as imagination or coincidence. But the accumulation of tales suggested a presence that refused to be ignored. It was as if Rachel's story had imprinted itself onto the town, shaping perception, bending reality around grief and fear. The psychological toll on law enforcement was tangible. Detectives who had once worked the case returned, retired, or transferred, each carrying fragments of unresolved questions. Many confessed to sleepless nights, replaying events, interrogations, timelines, and witness statements in their minds. The absence of closure gnawed at them. Investigators often walked the county road alone, hoping to feel what Rachel might have felt, to glimpse what the community could not see. A mental reconstruction of violence that left an indelible mark on all who sought truth. It became clear that Rachel's death was more than a murder. It was a riddle wrapped in the fabric of a town. Every effort at understanding was met with resistance. Every angle explored ended in ambiguity. Residents adapted, learning to coexist with fear, learning to live alongside the unanswered. Local authorities made annual reports to the state, updating statistics, documenting efforts, but nothing changed. The killer remained unknown, a ghost in human form, a specter who had touched the community and vanished without a trace. And yet, despite the frustration, despite the dead ends and the years of unrelenting ambiguity, the case remained alive in the minds of those who refused to forget. Every technological advancement offered renewed hope. Every cold lead revisited promised potential insight. Rachel Sutton's story was not just about a life taken. It was a testament to the persistence of human memory, the endurance of grief, and the stubborn refusal to let an injustice remain unresolved. The town waited, watched, and remembered. Each day a silent vigil. Each night a quiet prayer that the truth, finally, would reveal itself in a form both shocking and undeniable. By 2018, 3 decades had passed since Rachel Sutton's lifeless body was found on that dusty county road. Yet her absence was felt with a clarity sharper than ever. New generations had grown up hearing her name whispered in hallways and classrooms, an emblem of the inexplicable, the unsolved, the darkness that could walk alongside the ordinary. Detectives who had joined the force long after her death pored over files, evidence boxes, and photographs, attempting to reconstruct a timeline that seemed increasingly impossible to define. Every witness statement, every fiber, every hair was analyzed, compared, and reanalyzed. Technology had advanced enough to detect traces that were invisible in the 1980s, yet the killer had left so little behind that even modern science struggled to fill the gaps. One particularly promising lead emerged when investigators re-examined a series of letters Rachel had kept in a small leather journal. The entries were mundane at first glance. Notes about work shifts, recipes, and weekend plans. But one paragraph hinted at unease. A man, she wrote, had been watching her in public, lingering at a distance, vanishing whenever she approached. She described a sense of being followed, though she didn't know why. It was subtle, almost dismissible at the time, but in retrospect, it was chilling. Detectives realized that the perpetrator had been observing, planning, calculating with a patience that few could comprehend. Every detail of Rachel's life was likely scrutinized, every routine mapped, every vulnerability noted. DNA testing had finally advanced to the point where minuscule samples could provide usable profiles, and state-of-the-art labs began re-examining evidence collected decades prior. Hairs once dismissed as inconclusive were processed with precision, offering partial profiles that might indicate familial connections. Fingerprints long considered unmatchable were now digitally enhanced. Investigators began cross-referencing names with national registries, criminal histories, and even genealogical databases. The process was meticulous and exhausting, but hope lingered, the first flicker of light in a cold case that had resisted resolution for 30 years. Meanwhile, the community's relationship with the case had transformed from fear to obsession. Local historians, amateur detectives, and curious outsiders flocked to Lubbock, drawn by a narrative that seemed both timeless and terrifying. Every corner of the town had its story. The diner where Rachel worked, the park where she sometimes walked, the apartment building that became a shrine in memory if not in body. People shared rumors, some plausible, some clearly embellished, but each carried the weight of belief, as if the mere act of speaking about the past could somehow make sense of it. Townsfolk sometimes crossed paths with strangers asking questions, lingering a little too long, taking notes, always disappearing before any answers could be provided. The mystery itself had become a character, omnipresent, shaping daily life, and instilling a subtle wariness in even the most rational minds. A critical breakthrough came when a man who had lived near the scene in 1988 recalled an unusual vehicle parked near Rachel's apartment just days before her death. He described it as a dark, unmarked sedan with a driver who never exited, only observed. The car had no plates, he was sure, a detail that had long gone unrecorded. Investigators cross-referenced the model and year with local rental agencies, dealerships, and abandoned registrations. Every lead initially collapsed, but slowly the pieces began to align. The man's memory, reinforced by photographs from the time, pointed to a transient individual with a criminal history in neighboring counties. Profiles emerged, timelines coalesced, and patterns began to form where before there had been nothing. Rachel's co-workers were also revisited, many long retired or moved, yet recollections surfaced that had never been documented. One colleague recalled Rachel leaving work later than usual, visibly anxious, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Another mentioned a man who had called the diner repeatedly asking for Rachel, leaving no message but hanging up each time. When confronted years later, the man denied any involvement, claiming mistaken identity, but investigators filed his statements for comparison with other suspicious activity. Each lead, each memory, formed a web, intricate and delicate, fragile yet revealing small inconsistencies that suggested a pattern previously invisible. By now, the case had attracted attention beyond the local media. National true crime podcasts, investigative journalists, and forensic specialists began reporting on developments, drawing renewed public interest. Headlines screamed, "Texas Cold Case, 3 decades of mystery, unsolved murder sparks digital hunt. New DNA techniques could break Lubbock mystery." The pressure on law enforcement was immense. They were no longer just answering to the townspeople. The nation watched, analysts critiqued, families hoped. Each press release became a high-stakes gamble, revealing enough to generate interest, but withholding details to avoid tipping off potential suspects. In 2020, a surprising tip arrived from an anonymous source. A man had contacted the sheriff's office claiming knowledge of Rachel's murder. He spoke vaguely, describing a location and certain behaviors of the perpetrator that had never been disclosed publicly. Detectives approached with caution. Could this be a credible lead, or a cruel hoax intended to exploit the decades of frustration and grief? The individual's voice was modulated, his identity hidden, yet the specificity of the details forced investigators to treat the claims seriously. For the first time in years, the investigation felt as though it might pivot from conjecture to something concrete. Simultaneously, modern genealogical DNA services were applied to the samples, uncovering partial familial connections that suggested the perpetrator might belong to a specific lineage with roots in Texas. These results narrowed the suspect pool dramatically, but no immediate arrest could be made. Investigators needed confirmation, corroborating evidence, something tangible that would stand in court. Months of surveillance, background checks, and cross-referencing employment and travel records ensued. Every step was deliberate. The consequences of a false accusation could irreparably harm lives. Yet delay risked letting the suspect vanish forever. The tension was palpable, a chess game between decades-old deception and modern justice. As these threads converged, the town braced itself. Local residents sensed change, a shift in the air, subtle but undeniable. Conversations hushed when investigators were near. Newcomers were watched more closely. The county road, once a place of fear, became almost ceremonial. Every trip along it reminded the town of Rachel's absence, of a life interrupted. and of the looming possibility that someone responsible still walked among them. Families who had lived with the unresolved trauma for generations felt a strange mix of hope and dread, unsure if discovery would heal or deepen old wounds. By mid-2021, the investigation had coalesced into a tangible direction. A suspect emerged whose movements, background, and DNA partially matched what had been preserved in 1988. Investigators coordinated with federal agencies, checking financial records, travel histories, and known associations. Every aspect of the suspect's life was scrutinized under the microscope of 33 years of forensic and digital advancements. The pattern was there: careful planning, observation, mobility, avoidance of detection. The crimes aligned with a profile suggested decades earlier, confirming that methodical patience had allowed the perpetrator to remain invisible for decades. Yet even as hope blossomed, the case remained delicate. A single misstep could send everything into chaos. Prosecutors were consulted, legal strategies reviewed, and motions prepared. The pressure was immense. The town, the family, the nation watched, anxious for resolution yet fearful of disappointment. The specter of Rachel's life, her untimely death, and the decades of waiting had created a collective emotional strain that no courtroom procedure could entirely resolve. Every interview, every interrogation, every subtle check of evidence carried the weight of decades of grief, fear, and unanswered questions. And through it all, Rachel's story persisted, not only in files and photographs but in the psyche of a town that had been irrevocably changed. Her life, though brief, had left a mark more profound than most could comprehend. The county road, the diner, the apartment, and even the laboratory where her remains were analyzed had become sacred spaces in memory if not in function. Townspeople, investigators, journalists, and distant observers alike felt the pull of a story unresolved, the magnetic tension of a truth almost within grasp yet just beyond reach, like a photograph held in dim light, waiting to be fully developed. Even as the investigation edged closer to closure, the sense of dread never fully abated. 33 years of mystery had created a psychological imprint as permanent as physical evidence. Questions lingered about why, about motive, about the silent predator who had orchestrated a life's end with such precision. Each day brought new data, new possibilities, yet also reminded everyone involved of how carefully evil could hide, how quickly innocence could be destroyed, and how stubbornly truth could remain elusive. The town waited with bated breath, not knowing if the coming revelation would bring relief, shock, or the kind of haunting that lasts generations. By early 2022, the momentum had shifted. Investigators, armed with decades of preserved evidence, modern DNA analysis, and a growing list of potential suspects, began closing in on a tangible target. The town, long accustomed to living with the ghost of Rachel Sutton, sensed a subtle tension in the air. Conversations were quieter, glances longer, as if everyone was waiting for the inevitable reveal. Even the county road where Rachel's body had been discovered seemed to hold its breath, weeds swaying in the wind like silent witnesses to a past too cruel to forget. It was a late spring afternoon when a forensic breakthrough jolted the investigation forward. Hair samples preserved from under Rachel's fingernails were successfully sequenced using advanced genetic technology, producing a partial familial match. It wasn't a complete identification, but it was enough to narrow the pool drastically. Investigators began tracing the extended family tree, cross-referencing names, residences, and historical movements. Each connection they uncovered was meticulously mapped, timelines reconstructed, every detail corroborated with witness statements, rental records, and employment histories. The town remained unaware of the mounting storm, yet the tension was palpable among law enforcement. Simultaneously, investigators revisited the anonymous tip from 2020, the one that had seemed promising but unverified. By cross-referencing the details provided with the emerging familial match, detectives discovered a pattern that had been invisible for decades. The tipster had described behaviors and locations with uncanny accuracy, referencing small, seemingly trivial details about Rachel's routine and the surrounding neighborhoods. It became clear that whoever had provided the information had intimate knowledge of the crime, details not released to the public, confirming authenticity and focus. Investigators carefully verified the claims, ensuring that no false lead would derail the fragile progress that had taken years to achieve. Witnesses were re-interviewed, some after 34 years. Memories that had faded returned with surprising clarity, sharpened by the passage of time and the emotional weight of decades of reflection. One neighbor recalled a specific license plate fragment, something previously dismissed as irrelevant. Another remembered the faint smell of gasoline and a muffled engine noise, details previously overlooked. Each recollection, tiny and fragmented, was cross-referenced against travel logs, work schedules, and vehicle registrations. Slowly, a picture emerged. Not complete, not conclusive, but far clearer than anything the investigators had previously held. The suspect, now identified by a combination of DNA, genealogical analysis, and corroborated eyewitness testimony, was living quietly in a nearby county, decades of normalcy masking a violent act long hidden. Surveillance began carefully, methodical, designed to gather evidence without alerting the individual. Every move was documented, patterns observed, and behavior analyzed for inconsistencies. Investigators were acutely aware that this was the moment the decades-long investigation could either collapse under error or finally yield justice. Every step had to be precise, calculated, leaving nothing to chance. Locals began to notice increased law enforcement presence, unmarked cars lingering near intersections, officers taking notes near the old county road. Whispers spread, fueling both hope and fear. Some speculated that Rachel's killer had finally been found. Others feared the story might take a darker turn, that the past would erupt violently into the present. The town, long dormant in its collective anxiety, began to stir, the collective memory of a life stolen decades earlier suddenly coming alive with the pulse of imminent resolution. Forensic interviews were scheduled. Investigators approached with a mixture of strategy and patience, understanding that decades of concealment had likely created a carefully constructed facade. Psychological profiling suggested a meticulous individual, one capable of lying convincingly, masking guilt with everyday normalcy. Interviewers prepared extensively, rehearsing questions, anticipating evasions, and planning contingencies. The room was tense, silent except for the occasional shuffle of papers or the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Every word, every reaction, every microexpression was scrutinized, recorded, and analyzed. The first session yielded subtle but critical reactions, tensions in the face, small hesitations, slight shifts in posture. Nothing overt, nothing that could be used alone, but enough to signal that the suspect's confidence might be cracking. Detectives pressed gently, creating hypothetical scenarios, prompting recollections without revealing their evidence. Slowly, the veneer of normalcy began to fracture. The individual's speech patterns betrayed knowledge only the perpetrator could possess. Inconsistencies appeared when past events were discussed, and the atmosphere in the room became heavy with the tension of truth inching toward exposure. Meanwhile, the town waited unknowingly, unaware that decades of frustration were approaching a breaking point. Local news outlets, tipped off discreetly by law enforcement, began covering peripheral stories. Renewed investigation, potential breakthroughs, scientific advancements applied to cold cases. Public curiosity surged, and the narrative of Rachel's story, once fading into legend, regained vivid, almost cinematic clarity. Social media exploded with speculation, theories, and rekindled empathy, spreading beyond Lubbock to a national audience riveted by a decades-old mystery on the cusp of resolution. By midsummer, corroborating evidence began aligning. Surveillance footage, though grainy, placed the suspect near Rachel's apartment in 1988, consistent with witness accounts. Financial records confirmed the presence of a vehicle matching previous descriptions near the county road at critical times. DNA evidence, though partial, reinforced the familial connections identified earlier. For the first time, investigators had a composite of human, material, and circumstantial proof that could withstand scrutiny in court. The years of frustration, dead ends, and community anxiety were converging toward something tangible, the invisible slowly taking shape. The final stages of preparation were meticulous. Warrants were obtained, search plans devised, and tactical units briefed, ensuring that the operation could proceed safely and legally. Every officer, investigator, and analyst understood the significance. This was not just a cold case, but a decades-long journey to restore justice, a symbolic act that would resonate through the town and beyond. Rachel's family, briefed privately, were both hopeful and fearful. 34 years of unanswered questions had cultivated deep, complex emotions. Relief, anticipation, dread, and an almost unbearable tension that every new day threatened to intensify. On the morning of the operation, the air was electric with a sense of inevitability. Investigators moved quietly, systematically, ensuring that all legal and procedural safeguards were meticulously followed. Local law enforcement coordinated seamlessly with federal support, every angle covered, every potential obstacle anticipated. The suspect's home was approached with silent precision, cameras recording, movements synchronized, a tense choreography designed to ensure success without chaos. Every step carried the weight of decades, the emotional gravity of a community that had lived under the shadow of unresolved evil for more than 3 decades. Inside the home, investigators found evidence that directly linked the individual to the crime. Items preserved, hidden, and forgotten for decades were recovered, each item corroborating what forensic science, witnesses, and historical investigation had pieced together over years of meticulous work. DNA matched samples preserved from the original scene. Personal belongings, photographs, and correspondences established proximity, motive, and connection. It was the culmination of painstaking work, the convergence of modern science, intuition, and relentless pursuit. By late afternoon, the suspect was taken into custody. The arrest was quiet, controlled, almost surreal, given the decades that had passed. Law enforcement knew this was only one step. The legal process would follow, but the symbolic victory was immense. The town, meanwhile, began to absorb the news in stages. Initial disbelief, then cautious hope, then a collective exhale. Rachel Sutton's family, long haunted by unanswered questions, finally glimpsed the prospect of justice, a resolution that had been unthinkable for so long. Yet, even in the shadow of arrest, the town remained haunted. 34 years of fear, speculation, and loss could not be erased in a single day. Residents reflected on the lives altered by the crime, the missed moments, the subtle paranoia, and the collective anxiety that had lingered for generations. Rachel's memory persisted, no longer solely as a victim, but as a symbol of endurance, of the relentless pursuit of truth, and of a community's struggle to reconcile with the darkness that had once walked openly among them. The arrest sent shockwaves through Lubbock, reverberating along streets that had long since memorized fear. 34 years of silence, speculation, and unanswered questions were suddenly punctuated by action. A tangible proof that the past could, after decades, catch up with the present. Law enforcement remained cautious, publicizing only fragments of the investigation, careful not to compromise the ongoing case, but the townspeople felt the shift immediately, an invisible weight lifting, or perhaps a storm preparing to break. Every diner, gas station, and neighborhood street carried whispers. Could it really be over? Could Rachel Sutton's death finally be accounted for? Yet the shocking twist came not with the arrest itself, but with what followed during interrogations. The suspect, a man whose existence had been nearly invisible to the world, revealed an intricate web of deceit, manipulation, and hidden knowledge that no one could have predicted. He spoke not only of his involvement in Rachel's murder but of a broader pattern of planning and observation that extended beyond Lubbock, linking him to a series of crimes previously considered unrelated. Investigators realized the scope of his reach, the meticulous care with which he had concealed evidence, and the chilling precision of his actions. The full weight of his confession left the team stunned. A decades-long nightmare finally articulated in detail, yet far worse than anyone had imagined. Details emerged that reshaped the understanding of 1988. Rachel had been targeted not at random, but for reasons tied to her life that had never come to light until now. The suspect described her routines, her habits, and the patterns of her life with disconcerting clarity, explaining movements and encounters that investigators had only speculated about for decades. Each revelation cast a new light on witness statements, on overlooked clues, on the behaviors of neighbors, co-workers, and bystanders. The pieces of the puzzle aligned in ways that were at once horrifying and precise, confirming suspicions and disproving old theories, rewriting the narrative of that long-ago summer. The confession included details so specific that investigators had to pause repeatedly, verifying timelines, cross-referencing events, and ensuring consistency with physical evidence. The suspect admitted to staging certain aspects of the scene, intentionally misleading early investigators, planting false trails to ensure that the case would remain unresolved. This calculated manipulation explained decades of frustration, the countless dead ends, and the gnawing psychological tension that had haunted both law enforcement and the community. The horror was compounded by admiration for the meticulous planning, the stark realization that someone had walked among them, known intimately the rhythm of life in Lubbock, and yet remained undetected for over 3 decades. Rachel's family experienced a tumultuous wave of emotion. Relief battled horror. Hope battled rage. 34 years of imagining the why and how had left scars invisible yet deep. Hearing the details, seeing the precision with which Rachel had been stalked and ultimately murdered, the pain and grief reemerged with the intensity of the original loss, yet mingled with the bittersweet understanding that finally, justice could be sought. Her mother, trembling, clutched photographs of her daughter, reading aloud entries from Rachel's old journal that now seemed tragically prophetic, each line a reminder of innocence extinguished far too early. Community response was electric. The town, long frozen in a state of unresolved fear, found itself re-engaged in a narrative that had shaped generations. Local media covered the confessions, each word dissected, each revelation amplifying shock, disbelief, and fascination. The county road became symbolic, a place of pilgrimage for those who remembered the terror of decades past, and those drawn to witness the closure of a story that had refused to end. People gathered quietly at memorials, leaving flowers, letters, and candles, reflecting on the fragile boundary between safety and danger that Rachel's death had exposed so painfully. Investigators continued to uncover corroborating evidence to solidify the case for prosecution. Items hidden in storage, correspondence discarded or forgotten, and physical traces from Rachel's belongings all pointed definitively to the suspect. Forensic specialists cross-checked DNA, fingerprints, and fibers, now aligning perfectly with witness statements and confessions. Every formerly ambiguous clue fell into place, transforming decades of frustration into a coherent, irrefutable chain of evidence. The meticulous work, the patient analysis, and the decades-long commitment of law enforcement and volunteers had finally yielded results, a testament to perseverance against an almost unimaginable obstacle. As the legal process moved forward, the town absorbed the shockwaves of the revelation. Conversations buzzed with astonishment. How could a single individual orchestrate such precise planning and remain hidden for decades? How could normalcy, routine, and trust coexist with the presence of a predator among neighbors, friends, and co-workers? These questions became a collective reflection, a meditation on vulnerability, perception, and the endurance of memory. People who had once dismissed fear as exaggeration now confronted the chilling reality of events long suppressed. Even as the suspect awaited trial, the emotional impact extended beyond legal proceedings. Rachel's story, once a ghostly memory, became a lens through which the community examined its own patterns, its own complacencies, and the small moments that, if altered, might have changed history. Families, children, neighbors, and friends all reconsidered past interactions, fleeting suspicions, and minor details that had seemed inconsequential. The collective consciousness of Lubbock was reshaped by the realization that evil could operate silently, that vigilance and attention could not always prevent tragedy, yet that persistence and dedication could eventually yield justice. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric and tense. Jurors, prosecutors, and defense attorneys all navigated decades of evidence, testimony, and scientific breakthroughs. Witnesses, some long retired or relocated, returned to testify, recounting memories preserved in amber, sharpened by time and reflection. Rachel's mother and friends sat quietly, absorbing every revelation, alternating between tears, disbelief, and grim resolve. Outside, media coverage amplified the intensity, and residents gathered along courthouse steps, absorbing the drama that had consumed their town for more than 30 years. The trial unfolded slowly, meticulously, each day revealing new layers of manipulation, deception, and planning. The suspect's own confessions, combined with decades of preserved forensic evidence, created a narrative both compelling and horrifying. Testimony from law enforcement detailed the painstaking work required to link old clues with modern technology, highlighting the patience, skill, and ingenuity that had finally brought clarity. Observers noted the psychological impact, the tension in the courtroom, and the weight of history compressing into every piece of evidence, every recollection, every photograph displayed. Outside the courtroom, the town began to grapple with the duality of closure and shock. Rachel's name returned to the forefront of conversations, memorials were revisited, and people reflected on what it meant to live in a world where tragedy could remain hidden for decades. The county road, the apartment, the diner, places once marked by fear, now symbolized resilience, memory, and justice. Residents, long accustomed to the unease of uncertainty, experienced a complex mix of emotions. Relief that a predator had been identified, horror at the details revealed, and lingering anxiety about the unseen darkness that had once coexisted with ordinary life. And yet, even as legal processes began, the story of Rachel Sutton left an indelible mark. 34 years of mystery had transformed into a narrative of methodical evil and painstaking justice. Her life, though tragically brief, had catalyzed decades of vigilance, technological advancement, and community reflection. The town of Lubbock, long defined by fear and unanswered questions, now confronted the chilling clarity of truth. The shock was immense, the emotional weight profound, but the arc of justice, slow, deliberate, and relentless, was finally visible, offering a measure of closure that had once seemed impossible. The courtroom was a chamber suspended in time, yet electric with decades of history, grief, and anticipation. Every seat was filled, every eye fixed on the man who had eluded justice for 34 years. Prosecutors laid out the evidence with deliberate precision. DNA samples preserved since 1988, fibers from Rachel Sutton's clothing matched to items found in his home, eyewitness testimony finally corroborated, and the suspect's own confessions detailed with chilling specificity. The room was silent except for the cadence of voices narrating a story that had haunted Lubbock for more than 3 decades. A story that now unfolded with undeniable clarity. Rachel's mother sat at the front, her hands clasped tightly around a folded handkerchief. She had waited 34 years for this moment. Yet as she listened to the meticulous recounting of her daughter's final hours, she felt a strange mixture of relief and horror. The details were precise, clinical, and brutal. Every movement, every action by the perpetrator was catalogued. Each fragment of evidence, once obscure, now painted a clear picture of obsession, planning, and calculated violence. The weight of it was almost unbearable, yet there was solace in knowing the truth had finally emerged. Witnesses recounted long-forgotten details with renewed clarity, memories sharpened by the gravity of decades of waiting. A former neighbor testified about a car parked near Rachel's apartment, the engine idling for hours, a shadowed figure remaining inside. A diner coworker described Rachel leaving work late, glancing over her shoulder, sensing the presence of someone who should not have been there. Each recollection, once fragmented and dismissed, now aligned with forensic evidence, reinforcing the narrative that the suspect had constructed a life around meticulous observation and patient manipulation. The prosecution's strategy was unrelenting. They connected each piece of forensic evidence to timelines, eyewitness statements, and the suspect's confessions, creating a chain impossible to break. Every photograph, fiber, and trace DNA sample became a thread weaving a tapestry of calculated cruelty. Jurors leaned forward, captivated and horrified, absorbing the cumulative weight of decades-long suffering distilled into factual, irrefutable evidence. The courtroom became a theater of justice, a stage where decades of uncertainty, fear, and grief were distilled into one stark, unassailable reality. Defense attorneys attempted to dissect the timeline, challenge the memory of witnesses, and question the reliability of decades-old forensic techniques. Yet, even with meticulous cross-examination, the evidence was overwhelming. The suspect's own statements, containing details never released publicly, proved damning beyond question. His demeanor shifted subtly under scrutiny. The careful composure that had allowed him to live undetected for decades began to crack under the unrelenting precision of the courtroom. Every hesitation, every micro-expression, every contradiction was catalogued by the prosecution and observers alike, signaling the unraveling of a carefully maintained facade. Outside the courthouse, the town of Lubbock experienced a palpable tension, a collective holding of breath. Streets hummed with conversation, coffee shops were filled with murmurs, and the county road, the site of Rachel's death, became a symbolic locus for reflection. Residents revisited memories, whispered stories, and shared anxieties about the nature of hidden evil. 34 years of uncertainty had created a social consciousness acutely attuned to subtle signals, minor anomalies, and the potential for deception. The arrest had ended the waiting, but it had not erased the imprint of fear that lingered like a shadow over the town. The trial progressed in painstaking detail. Investigators presented forensic evidence sequentially, reconstructing Rachel's last known movements, illustrating the meticulous planning of the perpetrator, and linking him definitively to actions at the crime scene. The narrative unfolded like a tightly wound thriller, leaving jurors with a stark understanding of both the precision of the crime and the audacity of its concealment. Every fiber of Rachel's clothing, every hair sample, every trace of DNA became a character in the courtroom drama, speaking in silence yet delivering undeniable testimony. Family members of Rachel, having lived decades under the oppressive weight of the unknown, experienced a kaleidoscope of emotion. Relief intertwined with grief, satisfaction mixed with lingering sorrow. The courtroom's revelations were cathartic, yet they reopened wounds, forcing a confrontation with every what if, every imagined scenario that had haunted their nights for decades. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues reflected on their own roles in the narrative. Small choices that had seemed inconsequential now cast in a haunting light. Every glance, every forgotten interaction, every overlooked detail suddenly felt imbued with weight, a reminder that even ordinary life can be infiltrated by hidden malice. As the prosecution meticulously linked evidence to motive and action, jurors were shown the subtle manipulations the perpetrator had employed to mislead investigators in 1988. Fabricated alibis, staged locations, and deliberate misdirection had extended the investigation into decades of frustration. The precision was almost surgical, leaving investigators, both past and present, struggling to understand how such meticulous deception had gone undetected for so long. The courtroom became a lens into the mind of a predator, illustrating the dark intellect behind a single act of violence that had reshaped an entire town. Psychologists and forensic experts testified on the behavioral patterns, explaining the calculated nature of the crime, the methodical observation of the victim, and the extended planning that had ensured initial concealment. Their analysis provided jurors with a framework to comprehend not only the act itself but the mental processes that had allowed it to remain invisible for decades. The testimonies were chilling yet essential, revealing a predator who had existed alongside ordinary life, hidden in plain sight, and who had chosen his victim with cold precision. The emotional weight of the case extended beyond the courtroom. Lubbock residents reflected on their own vulnerability, the fragility of trust, and the enduring presence of memory in shaping perception. Conversations became tinted with caution, neighborhoods revisited routines, and the collective consciousness of the town absorbed the revelation that the past, no matter how distant, could return with intensity. Rachel Sutton's life, brief yet resonant, became a symbol of both loss and endurance, a touchstone for understanding the interplay between justice, memory, and community resilience. Every day of the trial brought new revelations. Surveillance images, once grainy and indecipherable, were enhanced to show the suspect near Rachel's apartment. Correspondence, long ignored or misplaced, was rediscovered, providing insight into the careful orchestration of events leading up to her death. Forensic analysis demonstrated that fibers, previously thought to be incidental, were deliberately placed to mislead, revealing a level of foresight and cunning that left the courtroom in stunned silence. The perpetrator's confession corroborated each detail, providing context and intent, cementing the narrative of careful, calculated planning that had eluded investigators for decades. Through the painstaking presentation of evidence, the jury began to understand not only the crime itself but its broader impact on the town. The prolonged period of uncertainty, the psychological weight borne by residents, and the lingering fear that had shaped social interactions for over 30 years were all brought to light. Rachel's death was no longer an isolated event. It was a lens through which the community examined its own history, values, and vulnerabilities. The trial became more than a legal proceeding. It was a collective reckoning, a confrontation with both human cruelty and the persistence of justice. By the final weeks of testimony, the cumulative effect of decades of investigation, modern forensic technology, and witness accounts converged. The suspect's carefully constructed life, long hidden behind the veil of normalcy, unraveled under scrutiny. Every alibi, every claim of innocence, every assertion of ignorance fell away in the face of irrefutable evidence. The courtroom was tense with anticipation, every participant acutely aware that history was being rewritten in real time. Rachel Sutton's story, long paused, was now arriving at resolution, yet the emotional reverberations extended far beyond the legal confines of the trial. Outside, the town of Lubbock remained a mirror of collective memory. Streets hummed with cautious conversations, coffee shops filled with whispers of disbelief, and families reflected on the thin line between ordinary life and hidden violence. The county road, once a locus of fear and speculation, had become a symbol of endurance and memory, a place where flowers and candles commemorated a life stolen yet remembered. The community absorbed the trial's revelations slowly, balancing shock with relief, horror with gratitude that, finally, decades of mystery had been confronted and unraveled. The courtroom held its breath as the final arguments were delivered. Prosecutors recounted the decades-long journey, emphasizing the meticulous forensic work, the corroborated confessions, and the chilling details that had remained hidden for 34 years. The defense attempted one last appeal to doubt, weaving theories of misidentification and memory decay, but the narrative of precision and persistence proved unassailable. Jurors leaned forward, absorbing the accumulation of evidence, each piece a testament to the painstaking work that had finally pierced the veil of time. The air was thick with anticipation, the collective tension of generations waiting for validation, closure, and the affirmation that truth, no matter how delayed, could prevail. Rachel's mother sat rigid, her fingers gripping the edge of the bench. The room seemed to shrink around her, every word, every image, every revelation pressing into the years of grief she had carried alone. Friends and family watched silently, aware that the decades of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and haunted memories were converging on a single, irrevocable moment. Outside the courtroom, the town held its own vigil, quiet streets, murmured conversations, and the occasional car passing slowly along the county road where Rachel's life had been extinguished so many years before. The judge instructed the jury with solemn gravity, emphasizing the weight of decades of evidence and the unprecedented nature of the case. Jurors absorbed every word, fully aware that their decision would resonate beyond the courtroom, shaping the emotional and social landscape of Lubbock for years to come. The gravity was palpable. Decades of fear, frustration, and speculation had led to this moment. The town, conditioned to the ambiguity of uncertainty, now awaited judgment not just as a legal formality, but as a symbol of closure, justice, and the possibility of restoration for a community scarred by silence. Deliberations were tense, meticulous, and deliberate. Jurors reviewed evidence, replayed witness statements, and debated the credibility of decades-old memories. Every fiber of Rachel's clothing, every preserved hair, Every fragment of forensic evidence was scrutinized. Each revelation from the suspect's confession was weighed against documented fact. The jurors' discussions were punctuated by long silences, reflective pauses, and the occasional gasp as the implications became fully apparent. Time itself seemed to stretch, the weight of 34 years compressing into every decision, every consideration, every mental recalculation. After hours of deliberation, the foreperson returned. The room went silent. The moment hung suspended like a storm waiting to break. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The words struck like thunder, shattering decades of anticipation, relief, and dread simultaneously. Tears streamed down the faces of Rachel's family. Their grief mingled with a sense of vindication. The suspect remained stoic, the carefully maintained facade finally pierced by the incontrovertible weight of decades-spanning evidence. Outside, the town exhaled collectively, a tension held for over 30 years now releasing in a wave of shock, relief, and the unsteady relief that accompanies long-delayed justice. But the shock did not end with the verdict. Details revealed during sentencing illuminated a level of premeditation that was almost incomprehensible. The suspect had meticulously planned Rachel's movements, tracked her routines, and constructed misleading trails for investigators. He had lived among neighbors, co-workers, and community members without detection, his life a mask of normalcy concealing decades of hidden malice. Each revelation added layers of horror, forcing the town to confront the uncomfortable truth that danger had been present in plain sight, silently observing, waiting, and calculating. Media coverage amplified the shock. National news outlets dissected the case, highlighting the precision of the crime, the decades of persistence required to solve it, and the emotional toll on the family and community. Podcasts, documentaries, and investigative journalists revisited the story from multiple angles, emphasizing the technological advancements that had made resolution possible. The narrative captivated audiences far beyond Lubbock, resonating as a story of patience, dedication, and the dark capacity for human deception. The town, simultaneously proud and haunted, became the epicenter of national reflection on justice delayed but not denied. Rachel's mother, though exhausted by the intensity of the trial, reflected privately on the profound complexity of her emotions. Relief for justice was tempered by sorrow for the years lost, the milestones missed, and the intimate details of Rachel's life stolen forever. She wandered the county road, her fingers brushing weeds and dust, each step an echo of grief, remembrance, and the subtle hope that her daughter's memory could finally rest within a framework of truth. Friends and neighbors joined quietly, forming an informal memorial, candles flickering against the evening wind, a town silently acknowledging the convergence of loss, memory, and the long arc of justice. The suspect's sentencing underscored the severity of the crime. Life imprisonment without parole was imposed, the court emphasizing both the brutality of the act and the extraordinary duration over which deception had been maintained. The sentence, while bringing closure, could not erase the haunting knowledge of the planning, observation, and patience that had allowed the perpetrator to remain undetected for decades. The emotional reverberations extended far beyond the courtroom, challenging residents to reconcile the notion of normalcy with the hidden potential for evil that had once existed among them. Counseling and community support became integral in the aftermath. Residents, many of whom had carried latent anxiety and suspicion for decades, sought ways to process collective trauma. Support groups, town meetings, and memorial events allowed shared reflection and acknowledgement of the psychological impact of prolonged uncertainty. Psychologists emphasized the subtle, long-term effects of unresolved crime, noting heightened vigilance, trust issues, and the persistent echo of fear in daily life. Rachel's story, though concluding legally, remained a catalyst for communal introspection, resilience, and the recognition of vulnerability inherent in human relationships. Even as the town adjusted to the verdict, Rachel's memory remained central. Annual vigils, quiet walks along the county road, and renewed emphasis on community awareness kept her story alive. The narrative of a life cut short, the methodical cruelty of her killer, and the eventual triumph of forensic persistence became intertwined in the collective consciousness. Lubbock, forever shaped by the events of 1988, embraced both remembrance and vigilance, ensuring that the lessons of Rachel Sutton's story extended to future generations. The psychological impact on law enforcement personnel involved in the case was profound. Detectives who had pursued fragments of evidence for decades experienced a mixture of relief, validation, and lingering unease. The realization that evil had operated unnoticed for so long, coupled with the ultimate resolution, highlighted both the limitations and capacities of human diligence. Investigators reflected on the intersection of patience, technology, intuition, and persistence, recognizing that justice, while sometimes delayed, could be achieved through relentless focus and meticulous attention to detail. The town's social fabric, once subtly frayed by suspicion and fear, began to stabilize. Neighbors reestablished trust, children grew up with a renewed sense of security, and communal rituals of remembrance became a bridge between past trauma and present healing. Rachel Sutton's story, while marked by tragedy, also became emblematic of perseverance, collective action, and the eventual triumph of truth over concealment. The narrative, though steeped in horror, carried a profound reminder that even in the face of meticulous evil, human persistence and dedication could restore equilibrium, offer closure, and reaffirm the capacity for justice. And yet, despite the legal resolution, the town remained haunted. 34 years of uncertainty had embedded themselves deeply into Lubbock's psyche, creating a generational awareness of fragility, trust, and vigilance. Conversations, once casual, were now punctuated with subtle reminders of hidden danger. Children, parents, and neighbors carried an unspoken consciousness that the extraordinary patience of evil could coexist with the ordinary rhythms of life. Rachel's absence, her story, and the meticulous darkness that had claimed her life lingered, a ghost in memory, in landscape, and in the consciousness of the community. The final reflection, in both courtroom and community, was the recognition that closure, while powerful, could never fully erase loss. Rachel Sutton's life, brief and stolen, remained central to the town's identity, a symbol of the consequences of hidden malice, the endurance of collective memory, and the capacity of human diligence to uncover truth against formidable odds. Justice had been served in legal terms, yet the emotional and psychological shadows persisted, leaving a nuanced legacy that intertwined horror, relief, grief, and the slow, painstaking path toward communal reconciliation. Even after the verdict, Lubbock remained suspended in a strange state of vigilance. The county road, once an unremarkable stretch of asphalt and gravel, had transformed into a silent monument, a place where the wind whispered through weeds and trees, carrying the weight of decades-old fear and the echoes of a life violently stolen. Residents walked past it with quiet caution, remembering the girl who had vanished in 1988, whose memory had dominated their collective consciousness for more than 3 decades. Memorial candles flickered intermittently, letters pressed into the soil, and faded photographs clung to weathered fences, small acts of remembrance that gave form to grief that had long lacked closure. Community gatherings became more reflective, subdued, tinged with the complexity of emotion that followed decades of unresolved trauma. People shared stories of Rachel Sutton, anecdotes from the diner, glimpses of her daily routines, and the casual interactions that now carried haunting significance. Even neighbors who had only witnessed fragments of the past felt compelled to speak, as if oral history could exorcise the lingering shadow of fear. Each recollection, precise or fragmented, became a thread in a tapestry of memory, a way for the town to acknowledge the loss while confronting the unsettling realization that someone had once walked unnoticed among them, capable of meticulous, cold-blooded violence. Families who had long shielded their children from the story began cautiously introducing them to the lessons embedded in Rachel's life and death. The narrative became both cautionary and instructive, a stark illustration of the vulnerabilities inherent in routine, trust, and community. Schools hosted discussions on personal safety, vigilance, and the importance of observation, not just as survival tactics, but as reflections on the human capacity for both empathy and cruelty. The psychological weight of a story that spanned generations became a teaching tool, emphasizing awareness without panic, remembrance without paralyzing fear. Rachel's mother, now older and visibly worn from decades of anxiety, took a quiet, almost ceremonial role in the town's remembrance. She visited the county road frequently, arranging small displays, leaving notes, and occasionally speaking aloud to the memory of her daughter. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, carried across the empty asphalt, blending grief with resilience. Friends and extended family accompanied her sometimes, their presence a tangible reminder that the community had survived, endured, and was slowly reconstructing itself in the aftermath of trauma. The ritual of memory, repeated over years, became both a coping mechanism and an act of defiance against the darkness that had long held sway. Local law enforcement continued to reflect on the case with a mixture of pride and trepidation. The resolution, while legally definitive, left lingering questions about the nature of human observation, patience, and concealment. Detectives, some retired, some still active, revisited files, evidence photographs, and procedural notes, marveling at the careful orchestration that had allowed a single individual to evade justice for decades. Discussions in precincts and briefing rooms were tinged with awe and unease, an acknowledgement that even the most meticulous systems of law enforcement could be tested by the patient calculation of a determined predator. The media's attention did not wane immediately after the verdict. National outlets, true crime podcasts, and investigative journalists revisited the story repeatedly, dissecting the suspect's methods, the technological breakthroughs that had enabled the arrest, and the broader social implications of the case. The town of Lubbock became a focal point for discussions on cold cases, forensic persistence, and the societal responsibilities of vigilance. Residents who had long felt isolated by their experiences now found themselves at the center of national narratives. Their personal grief transformed into a story of collective endurance, legal triumph, and societal reflection. Psychologists consulted by the community emphasized the subtle, ongoing effects of trauma, even in the wake of resolution. Residents exhibited heightened awareness of unusual behavior, lingering anxiety regarding routine safety, and complex emotions balancing relief with residual fear. Children growing up with knowledge of Rachel's story carried an understanding of vulnerability alongside lessons in resilience. The case, while resolved legally, had seeded a psychological imprint that would persist across generations, shaping the collective consciousness of the town in ways that statistical reports and crime summaries could never fully capture. Memorials and vigils became more organized, their symbolism layered with decades of reflection. Flowers were replaced, notes renewed, candles lit and extinguished with ritual precision. Community leaders, educators, and law enforcement collaborated to ensure that Rachel Sutton's memory was honored responsibly, acknowledging both her life and the extraordinary lengths required to uncover the truth. Each act of remembrance carried weight, reinforcing communal bonds while simultaneously reminding residents of the fragility of life and the persistent shadow of unseen malice. Meanwhile, the suspect remained incarcerated, serving as a living reminder of both justice and the depths of human calculation. His presence in the prison system, heavily secured and monitored, became another layer of reflection for the town. Media coverage highlighted not only his crimes, but the extraordinary patience he had exercised in concealing them, a stark counterpoint to the meticulous work of investigators. Residents grappled with the notion that evil, carefully concealed, had coexisted alongside ordinary life, prompting renewed appreciation for vigilance, intuition, and communal responsibility. As anniversaries of Rachel's death passed, the town found itself in a state of bittersweet reflection. The legal resolution had concluded one chapter, yet the emotional, psychological, and social reverberations continued. Residents maintained a heightened awareness of both their vulnerability and their capacity for resilience. Community meetings, memorials, and educational programs reinforced the lessons embedded in Rachel's story, ensuring that remembrance remained active, intentional, and instructive. The narrative, once dominated by fear and speculation, had evolved into one of reflection, endurance, and cautious optimism. Rachel's legacy, paradoxically, became a source of strength for Lubbock. The town learned to navigate uncertainty with patience, to confront hidden danger without succumbing to panic, and to honor memory without being overwhelmed by grief. Families revisited routines, neighbors communicated more openly, and local authorities integrated lessons learned into procedural training. The story of a cold case solved after decades became a benchmark for community awareness, law enforcement persistence, and the interplay between trauma, memory, and eventual justice. Yet even as stability returned, a subtle undercurrent of tension persisted. 34 years of unresolved fear had instilled a consciousness that could not be entirely erased. Residents remained attuned to anomalies, subtle behavioral cues, and the potential for deception. The county road, the apartment, and the diner, all once ordinary spaces, had become symbolic markers of both loss and survival. Rachel Sutton's absence, her meticulously observed life, and the ultimate triumph of forensic diligence lingered in the collective psyche, a reminder that evil could persist unnoticed, but that truth, persistence, and justice could prevail, albeit after unimaginable patience. For historians, journalists, and criminologists, the case became a textbook example of cold case resolution, emphasizing the combination of technological advancement, investigative persistence, and community collaboration. The narrative illustrated both the capacity for patient evil and the resilience of law enforcement systems, offering insights into methodology, human behavior, and the social dynamics of fear, grief, and collective memory. Each lecture, article, and documentary reinforced the interplay between trauma, justice, and societal learning, ensuring that Rachel Sutton's story extended far beyond the geographical confines of Lubbock. As the town slowly moved forward, the community internalized the paradox of closure and ongoing vigilance. Life returned to ordinary rhythms, yet the extraordinary history of Rachel Sutton's disappearance and eventual resolution remained embedded in daily consciousness. Conversations carried subtle undertones of caution, reflection, and empathy. Streets, neighborhoods, and families absorbed lessons of observation, precaution, and the moral imperative to remember and honor lives lost to deliberate violence. Rachel's story, though resolved legally, remained emotionally and socially unresolved in its entirety, a perpetual reminder of both the darkness and resilience inherent in human society. The collective memory of Lubbock crystallized around this duality. Justice achieved yet awareness sharpened, grief acknowledged yet life continuing, fear tempered by vigilance, and memory transforming trauma into enduring lessons. Rachel Sutton's life, though tragically brief, became the nexus of communal reflection, a story of enduring vigilance, meticulous investigation, and the profound capacity for human resilience. The cold case that had haunted a town for decades evolved into a narrative of survival, justice, and the enduring interplay between darkness and light in the fabric of everyday life. Time did not move forward in Lubbock the way it did everywhere else. It circled. It returned. It hovered. Even after the verdict, even after the sentence, the town lived with the sensation that the past was never truly behind them. It lingered in late-night conversations, in the way doors were locked twice instead of once, in the subtle pauses when strangers crossed paths and studied one another just a second too long. The cold case may have been solved, but its gravity still bent daily life, pulling memory and caution into every ordinary moment. The diner where Rachel Sutton once worked became a place of quiet reverence. Regulars noticed how the clatter of plates seemed softer now, how conversations dipped whenever someone mentioned the late 80s. A booth near the window was left empty more often than not, unofficially reserved by memory. Staff members who had not even been born when Rachel disappeared learned her name as part of the establishment's history, spoken with a seriousness usually reserved for warnings. The past was no longer abstract. It had a face, a name, and a timeline that refused to fade. Late at night, the county road drew visitors who could not sleep. Headlights cut through darkness, illuminating the stretch of asphalt where answers had been hidden for decades. Some came to stand in silence. Others came to talk, to whisper thoughts they could not say aloud anywhere else. There was no official monument, no towering marker, only the weight of knowing that this unassuming strip of land had witnessed the end of a life and the beginning of a mystery that shaped a town for a generation. Rachel's mother continued her visits, though now they were quieter, more internal. Justice had brought confirmation, but not peace in the way outsiders imagined. She understood now that closure was not a door that slammed shut. It was a narrow passage that had to be walked slowly, step by step, with grief still clinging to every surface. Some days she felt lighter, able to breathe without the crushing pressure of not knowing. Other days, the knowledge itself felt heavier, sharper, impossible to set down. Law enforcement agencies across Texas quietly reviewed old files, spurred by the case's resolution. Cold cases long considered dormant were reopened, evidence re-examined, timelines reconstructed. Detectives spoke openly about the lessons learned, about patience, about preserving even the smallest fragment, about believing that time did not erase truth, only buried it. The Sutton case became a reference point, cited in briefings and training sessions as proof that persistence could outlast even the most careful deception. Yet with that hope came an unsettling realization. If this crime could remain hidden for 34 years, how many others still waited in silence? The thought crept into conversations, into professional reflections, into private doubts. Resolution brought clarity, but it also exposed the vastness of what remained unknown. The solved case did not quiet the darkness. It illuminated how much of it still existed. The man responsible faded from public view, locked away behind layers of concrete and steel, but his shadow lingered. People struggled to reconcile the image of an ordinary life with the capacity for such deliberate cruelty. He had attended community events. He had smiled. He had blended in. That knowledge unsettled the town more deeply than the violence itself. Evil had not announced its presence. It had waited patiently, watching, calculating, confident that time would protect it. Media interest slowly shifted, but the story never truly left. Documentaries reframed it. Podcasts dramatized it. Headlines recycled phrases like cold case breakthrough and justice after decades. For outsiders, it was compelling content. For Lubbock, it was lived experience, something that could not be neatly packaged or consumed without consequence. Residents learned to navigate interviews carefully, guarding their words, protecting their emotional boundaries from being turned into sound bites. Children who grew up hearing the story absorbed it differently than their parents had. For them, Rachel Sutton was not a missing person. She was a symbol, a reminder that routines could be deceptive, that trust required awareness, that safety was never guaranteed but always worth protecting. Schools incorporated discussions about observation, community responsibility, and speaking up when something felt wrong. The legacy of the case became educational, shaping instincts rather than fear. Anniversaries passed with a new kind of weight. The date of Rachel's disappearance no longer marked another year without answers. It marked endurance. Vigils were smaller but more intentional. Candles were lit not in desperation, but in remembrance. Names were spoken with clarity instead of uncertainty. The absence was still there, but it had been given shape, context, and truth. For some residents, the resolution unlocked memories long suppressed. Dreams returned. Nightmares resurfaced. Therapists reported an increase in people seeking help, not because the crime was unsolved, but because it finally was. The human mind, long braced against uncertainty, now had space to process grief fully. The delayed impact of knowing proved just as powerful as the years of not knowing. The town's relationship with silence changed. What was once avoidance became reflection. What was once fear became vigilance. Neighbors checked on one another more often. Small gestures, rides home, shared meals, casual conversations, took on deeper meaning. The cold case had fractured trust once. Its resolution encouraged cautious rebuilding. And still, late at night, questions lingered. Not about who did it or how, but about the moments in between. The missed signs, the chances for intervention, the fragile intersections where a different choice, a sharper instinct, or a single interruption might have changed everything. These questions had no answers, only echoes, and they followed the town into the quiet hours before dawn. Rachel Sutton's name no longer belonged only to the past. It lived in policies rewritten, in evidence preserved more carefully, in the determination to keep searching even when hope thinned. Her story became part of the town's moral compass, a reference point for why vigilance mattered and why time should never be allowed to excuse indifference. The cold case was solved, but its resonance continued to unfold, layer by layer, shaping how the town understood itself. Justice had arrived late, but it arrived with force, leaving behind not relief alone, but responsibility. Responsibility to remember, responsibility to watch, responsibility to believe that even when answers take decades to surface, they are still worth pursuing. And as Lubbock moved forward, carrying both the weight and the clarity of truth, one reality remained unshakable. Some stories never truly end. They settle into the landscape, into collective memory, into the instincts passed from one generation to the next. Rachel Sutton's story became one of them. A solved case, yes, but also a permanent echo, reminding the town that the past is never silent and justice, once awakened, leaves footprints that do not fade. By the time the noise faded, what remained was not relief, but clarity sharpened to a painful edge. Lubbock did not celebrate the end of the case. It absorbed it. The solved cold case did not close a chapter so much as expose the final pages everyone had been afraid to read. Justice had arrived, but it arrived carrying questions that no verdict could erase. Questions that settled into the town like fine dust, impossible to completely sweep away. People began revisiting moments they once dismissed as ordinary. A stranger's glance, passing comment, a routine broken for no reason anyone could explain at the time. In hindsight, everything seemed louder, sharper, more significant. The human mind searched desperately for meaning, for the one overlooked signal that could have changed the trajectory of an entire life. This was not guilt in the legal sense, but a collective reckoning, an acknowledgement that evil rarely announces itself and often thrives on being underestimated. The investigation files, now declassified in parts, circulated quietly among journalists and researchers. Page after page revealed how close the truth had come to the surface over the years, only to slip away again. Partial match dismissed. A witness unsure of their own memory. A lead deemed unlikely because it felt too mundane. The revelations were unsettling, not because of incompetence, but because they exposed how thin the margin truly was between discovery and decades of silence. Rachel Sutton's final hours were reconstructed with near-surgical precision. Her movements, her conversations, the places she stood, unaware she was being observed. These reconstructions were not shared publicly in full, out of respect, but fragments reached the community anyway, enough to ignite fresh waves of grief. Knowing exactly how close she had been to safety, to being seen, to being protected, reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Her mother rarely spoke to the media now. When she did, her words were measured, deliberate, stripped of dramatics. She spoke not of forgiveness, not of peace, but of truth. Truth, she said, was heavier than hope, but it was solid. It did not shift underfoot. It allowed her to stand without collapsing. In private moments, she admitted that some nights were harder than ever, because imagination had finally been replaced by certainty, and certainty had a cruel finality to it. The town's law enforcement leaders held closed-door meetings about legacy, about responsibility, about what this case would mean long after current officers retired. Policies were updated quietly. Evidence storage protocols tightened. Cold case units received renewed funding, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a commitment born from lived experience. The message was unspoken but clear. Time would no longer be an excuse. Yet even with institutional change, the emotional residue remained stubborn. Trust rebuilt slowly, unevenly. People smiled at neighbors, attended gatherings, resumed routines, but beneath the surface was an awareness that had not existed before 1988. A sense that normalcy was fragile, that safety required attention, that silence, while comfortable, could be dangerous. Late-night radio shows invited callers to talk about the case, and voices cracked over the airwaves. Some callers remembered Rachel personally. Others remembered the fear. Others remembered nothing at all, yet felt its impact anyway. These conversations revealed how deeply the case had embedded itself into the town's identity. It was not just a crime. It was a reference point, a before and after marker that shaped how an entire community understood loss. The suspect's name slowly disappeared from headlines, replaced by broader discussions of cold cases nationwide. But his presence remained in the collective imagination as a warning rather than a fixation. He was no longer the center of the story. Rachel was, and the years stolen, and the patience of truth. Students wrote essays about the case. Criminology classes dissected it. Ethics discussions used it as an example of moral responsibility beyond legal obligation. The narrative evolved from shock to study, from tragedy to lesson. And still, the emotional weight resisted intellectual containment. Knowing how something happened did not make it easier to live with. The county road continued to exist in its quiet indifference, cars passing over it daily, most without slowing. But those who knew, knew. They felt it in the way the air changed, in the instinctive tightening of the chest, in the sudden urge to look around. Places remember, even when people try not to. Rachel's story began to reach people who had never heard of Lubbock before. Letters arrived from across the country, addressed to her family, to the police department, to the town itself. Some thanked them for perseverance. Others shared stories of unresolved losses, of loved ones still missing, of hope sustained by this one improbable resolution. The case became a quiet beacon, a reminder that time could delay justice but not always defeat it. And yet, hope came with responsibility. For every solved case, countless others remained unanswered. The town understood this now more deeply than most. Solving one mystery did not balance the scales. It sharpened awareness of how many remained in shadow. The victory was real, but it was not complete. As the years continued to move forward, the cold case settled into history without becoming distant. It stayed close, present in how people spoke, how they watched, how they listened. It reshaped instincts. It influenced choices. It taught the town that the past is not something you leave behind, but something you learn to carry without letting it crush you. Rachel Sutton became more than a victim. She became a fixed point in time, a reminder that lives matter even when the world moves on too quickly. Her absence demanded attention. Her story demanded honesty. Her memory demanded vigilance. And in the quiet moments, when the town finally seemed at peace, there was still an understanding that some echoes never fade. They soften, they recede, but they remain woven into the fabric of everyday life. The cold case was solved, yes, but its true impact lay not in the verdict, not in the sentence, not even in the headlines that once screamed shock. Its true impact lived in the changed behavior of a town that learned, too late and at great cost, that truth is patient, silence is dangerous, and justice, when it finally arrives, leaves no one untouched. The story moved toward its end, but the echo did not. It lingered in memory, in caution, in resolve. And as Lubbock continued forward, carrying both clarity and loss, one final realization held firm. Some answers bring closure, others bring responsibility, and the heaviest truths are the ones that stay with you long after the case is officially closed.